Welcome to the Golden Goat with me, Ruth Roach. I am so excited about this podcast. The reason I'm doing a podcast is because I've been in this amazing industry for 40 years. Can you believe it? I know it's hard to believe. I don't believe it, but it is true. So that's why I'm doing this. I want to share all the shit that I've done and learned to help other people, hopefully, not have to do some of the same stupid shit that I've done. And also, when those rough times come up, how do we get through it? How do we move on? How do we make our dreams come true? Because that's what I've done. And I'm so happy to be able to bring that to you. So let's get going. I have a very special guest today. He's the CEO of BeautyCast Network. He's been in our industry for a long time, 45 years, which is
45 plus.
that's a lot of experience, right? I
Yep.
know I stopped putting the plus a while ago. He's formerly the CEO of Hairbrained and publisher of American Salon Magazine, and he currently is the host of two different podcasts, Social Beauty Makers and Mastering Beauty. So I've known him for many, many years and many incarnations of both of our careers. And I just wanted to have him on today. So please let me introduce Mr. Gordon Miller.
Yeah.
Welcome.
I should have brought sound effects.
Here I have one. That's the crowd going
Oh,
wild.
I like that. I like that one. I love that. I'm so excited you're in the podcast space. I do love podcasting and I love listening to them more than I love doing them. And I'm so excited to have you, in the space as a host and someone out there talking. You and I have done a lot of podcasts together from my side, and I always mention one of the things I love about you so much is your humor, and I love that I know that's going to come along, inside of your conversations, and I think that will make this even extra special. So, welcome to the podcast space.
Well, thank you. I'm a little nervous because you're the pro and I've been on your podcast a few times, but I
Yeah.
just love your message, whatever it is at the time as you've evolved and um, you're a forward thinker, you're a disruptor, you're someone who goes places where people don't necessarily want to go, and sometimes it's uncomfortable, and it just really always sparks my imagination.
Thank
So
you.
one of the things that, well, I just want you to talk about what are you passionate about right now, and whatever that can be, whatever it is, like where are you at?
I've kind of got a couple different lanes. One, because I have those 45 years, is trying to focus on the last chapter. I feel like I'm coming up on the last chapter. And I mean that in the best way possible, and I'm a believer in kind of putting a line in the sand for everything, goals, projects, different parts of my career. I'm always thinking like, well, what's going to be next? So I'm definitely thinking about kind of the wind down in the next few years. That's important to me. I don't think I'll ever be completely done, but there's that. And then I think in a lot of ways it's really freeing and it's inspiring me to think about bigger thoughts, like the world of beauty. It's kind of like when we think about a larger world, like whether it's social justice issues or climate or all, we're an industry, we have our issues. And a lot of times I think we don't have enough clarity and we don't talk about them enough. And so I'm thinking about some of the bigger ones. And number one, and you and I've talked about this, is what I see as we've talked about a labor shortage for a long time. I
Yeah.
have some arguments with that. I think we have a mentorship shortage, which scares me about the future of the industry. I keep thinking about where the world is going, and we all have our opinions, but I think we're in dicey times. I think no matter what a person's politics are, people tend to believe, who the hell knows where we're going? I feel like we're such a reflection of the larger world that I feel that way about our industry. And then when I try to sort that out in my head, like why and what might be some of the directions we take if there's any major shifts, which I think are very much steeped in the business model stuff. But it's been supercharged by conversations on social media, which often aren't based in reality. All those things taken together, to me, have driven the industry into a very much more and more people are by themselves in different ways. And more people who are with teams, even the teams have evolved both generationally, but also kind of the business model. I think the hybrid salon model is very disruptive in a negative way, because I think in those environments where you've got independents and team members kind of mixed up, I think again mentorship may fall by the wayside because you don't have as many people, in the team environment. So and mentorship has been the secret to almost every career I've known that's been successful. So that worries me in a very big way.
Yeah, same. Like I was lucky to have my own mentors, especially at the beginning of my career when I needed them the most. And
Yeah.
but why do you think that's happened? Like, what are some specific things that you think has put us where we are today?
Well, again, I think, I guess first, like a couple stats. 2019, the PBA did a big study on the industry. And one of the stats was that we were 61% part-time as an industry. And that was a red flag for me. We've always had a lot of part-time in the industry, and that's a good thing in many ways, but it's really grown significantly. And then looking at some of the other numbers that we can find our way to in the industry, I see it as a parallel with the shift towards more and more independence. Independence has been around forever, booth rental, chair rental, suites, which have been around for 25, 30 years now. But pre-pandemic, it really started to expand. And I believe that expansion comes from the social media chatter and a lot of misinformation. And one thing I know, having spent 20 years in the school side of the industry, is most young people come into the industry wanting to do hair. And I think they quickly also layer in this, I want to be my own boss, I want to own a salon. And I think that doesn't necessarily come from inside of them. It's more external. It's like the thing to do. Like everybody, this is what everybody does. Like you're supposed to go open your own. So that desire gets in early. And I think as the world has evolved in the last, let's say, 10 years, especially, because of the social chatter, I think there's pressure on people to move towards that faster. And not like bad pressure, it's just like dreams and aspirations. Oh, you're struggling? Well, maybe the solution is going by yourself rather than kind of thinking about where am I today? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What don't I know? What do I still need to learn and understand before I go out on my own? So I think they're jumping into independence sooner. And social media and digital kind of progress in the world has made being independent, including your own boss, easier because of all the tools. So the barrier to entry into independence has never been lower. Coming out of pandemic, things got very discombobulated for the world, also for our industry. And the voices that I think sometimes are misleading on purpose or not have gotten louder than ever. So I just think we live in a reactive world, and a lot of people have reacted and said, I'm going this way, and being independence. And that is the driver, because when you're in a suite, it's hard to find mentors. If you're in a suite, or in a rental environment where you've got a lot of freedom and not a team structure, it's really, I think, easy to not even know you need a mentor. Because again,
Yes.
in those older environments, we saw it around us, people stepped up, we observed it, we heard about it. And then I think what we see happening with brands and shows, which is really kind of a pullback on education post-pandemic, not as much as there was. Well, to me, a lot of the mentorship messages that I think the industry has been in tune with for many years, up until recently, it came from the stages and the platforms and the classrooms. There was so many of them and so many artists who were out there all the time. And that has been greatly reduced. And so, it's almost like becoming a lost message as
Yeah.
to the power of mentorship and the importance.
Yes, I totally agree. And you just said in there, um, you don't know what you don't know until you get out there and do
Yep.
it. And I think what's happened, one of the things I notice is that people learn one thing and then they
Hmm.
specialize in that, and that's what they go out and do. And then when you burn out on that, or it's not in style anymore, what are you going to do? And
Yes.
so the skills, the mentorship along with that goes with skills that have to do with having a conversation with somebody, having a consultation with somebody, learning by watching someone do that.
Yep.
Just all those little things that when you're in a vacuum by yourself, and it's different if you have years of experience behind you and then you go have your own
Yep.
suite. But I
Yep.
think it's hard, especially getting right out of school, to know what you're getting into and to have anyone to run in the back room and go, "Oh my God, she's a level 4 with box color, you know, what would you do?"
Yes. 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 That's huge. It's
Yeah,
huge.
yeah,
And we know that forever, and it's not just our industry, but most people going into professions, if there's some sort of schooling that's required of them, or they're in a four-year college, if it's like my degree was in finance, so I did the traditional route. But whether it's finance or cosmetology or law, I think it's pretty accepted that you don't know a heck of a lot by the time you get out of school. It just kind of is what it is. School gives us kind of that, kind of the entry into the industry, just a simplistic, like, okay, welcome.
Yeah.
Now comes the hard work. Now comes taking what you learn and putting it in the context of a business. Whether it was me in finance and going to work, on that side of things and getting into a business and finding out it was nothing like what I thought it would be. So, or in a salon, I think similarly, you're stepping into the real world. And I think most people who are perceptive just figure out really quickly, it's like, oh my gosh, I have so much to learn. And then hopefully they get to it. But I think the opportunities to get to it have become more difficult. Again, less role models, less mentors, less people directing you.
Yeah.
And then this weird, and I think this is somewhat generational, but I still connect a lot of it to pandemic, which is, and we've seen the evolution of generations. I'm of the baby boomers, so I'm the oldest. Well, I think there's one older than me, but there aren't that many of them left. So we've seen all these generations come, and we're having a big conversation about, this new generation is different. Well, we've always had those conversations. When I was a kid, there was conversations about my generation and how the people before us felt, and how we were going to deal with one another. It's been a never-ending struggle. And I think we're at this place where kind of the industry's institutions, I'm just guessing, it feels like nobody wants to offend anybody by saying what might be perceived as the wrong thing. And I'll use an extreme example, but that's the conversations about the need to hustle. I'm a
Yeah.
huge, I don't know anybody who's successful who's not hustling.
Right.
And I think it's important to say to young people, hustling doesn't mean you work 24/7, 365 days a year. I've had friends, I know you have too, in the industry who have had a part-time career for a long time because of family perhaps, or maybe they got something else going on. But if they're going to be successful doing work part-time, and I know a lot of people who are, especially in the Chicago market and really great salons, they take their 3 days and they hustle.
Yeah.
If they're in for half a day, they hustle. If they're in for one client, they hustle. So I think it's just understanding that whatever time you're going to put into your career, that the person who's hustling in that time, not taking it home with them, but in that time, versus the person who's not, the hustler is probably going to win.
Yeah. And what would you say to someone who is listening that they don't know what we mean by hustle? Like, what does that look like, when you're starting out,
Oh,
or
I
when you're
think,
not starting out, when you want a busy
yeah, I
job,
mean,
when you want to be successful?
it's so many things. I think it's first and foremost just having an appreciation of time and what it means relative to all the things that we can do versus what we do. So there, I worked, my biggest mentor in life, and I know you knew him, was Leo Passage.
Yeah.
And he was my workaholic mentor. I love that part of him. Like, and I
Yeah.
just kind of became a different version of him and just love work so much. But he was always looking at, as a company, how can he find efficiencies in education? And a lot of that was about the hustle. It was about, hey, we have an obligation to teach people certain things, and we don't have a lot of time to do it. And so, whether it was the way he approached things systematically or the way he tried to inspire us as people on his team, it's like there's only so many hours in a day. Like, how do we get as much out of them as we possibly can? And just appreciate that. Because the other side of it is to really do the work well, whatever that work might be. If you can't compress the work into the time you have and you want to be successful, well, then you do have to take it home with you. There's no getting around the work needs to be done if you aspire to success. And so I think it was magical a long time ago to learn that, if I was really focused on efficiencies and paying attention to the right things, and most importantly, that's the people we do business with, our clients, people who buy our things from us, the people in the salon, our teammates, and we think about not wasting time. It's so
Yeah.
precious. And for someone behind the chair, time is money. And I think we say that all the time, but I really believe 80% of people don't even know what it means. And they're not in the weeds thinking about how do I squeeze a little bit more out of my time so I can make more money.
Yes.
There's that too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that when you're focused on just not running behind, or you've got the pressure of, I hope this turn, whatever it is,
Yep.
it's hard. You check out and just want to get through it. I do that
Exactly.
still. And I think it's a matter of like staying present in the moment,
Yeah.
and being grounded enough in what we're doing that we can be with that client, and have conversations about what their goals are with their hair, or something you're thinking of for them for the future. Oh, you know what I was thinking of? We can evolve your look into blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
So next time we'll add this and we'll do that. So you're kind of training them in a way to always be looking for something new and exciting to add in.
And having goals, I'm so glad you mentioned goals because it connects so importantly to this. You have to have goals for yourself. And I think when you talk about the hustle, if you aspire to whatever version of that looks right to you, I think goals are extremely helpful, and I always had those, going back to my pivot point days, we kind of knew where we were headed, with things. We knew what the deadlines were. We knew what the urgency or not urgency was. And I think, in the salon in particular, um, as an example, if you have a goal to give every client a great consultation, because most of the best hairdressers I know over a glass of wine will admit they don't always have time to do that. They feel guilty.
Right.
But if you, and these are the greats, um, but, but I think if you kind of break down your work and find some goals that help you have a measuring stick against, what you're trying to accomplish, and again, where does the hustle bring something good to you, or perhaps get in the way? I mean, you can hustle yourself to death, So, but I think goals are really important, and if you break down your time with any client, you just have those benchmarks of, I want to make sure I gave a great consultation. I want to make sure that I took time to explain product. It's one of the great failings of the industry. There's no doubt about it. And you work with product companies forever, and it just is. Most salons don't do it very well. Most salons barely do it. Most hairdressers don't do it well. And as a client, because I've always paid for services, I get frustrated as a client that I don't hear about product.
Yes.
Like, all this stuff is in this salon. Like, how come you never talk about it? It must be terrible. Like, you
Yeah.
must not like it, my hairdresser, because otherwise you talk about it. It's friggin' everywhere. And I hear that from a lot of client friends and even strangers. It's like, oh, I wish they would tell me more about that stuff so I could be better when I get home.
Yes, yes, and telling people how to style their own hair, teaching them
Oh
and
my
letting
God.
them, our arms are in totally different places during the styling process.
Right?
Yes, are, so, and people say things all the time. No one's ever showed me this before. No one's ever explained this before. And I don't know if we're just, not thinking about it because we're too busy, or we're um feeling like, I know I used to feel like I don't want to sell,
Right.
and I think that happens a lot, and I don't know why, but, I had a conversation with a friend the other day, and she gets, commission off of the products that she sells.
Yep.
I said, what commission do you get? She goes, she didn't even know because
Right.
it's not
Yeah.
important to her for some reason,
Right.
you know? So I thought that was really interesting.
And
But
but what's important there is it's hard not to believe that it is important to clients. Like,
yeah,
it is. If you talk to enough people, we leave the salon. Here's an interesting statistic. Only 30% of clients get to the fourth appointment, the fourth. So we
that's
have huge
crazy.
turnover. We have huge turnover,
Yeah.
and we don't realize it a lot of times because almost no clients tell us they're leaving. They just never come back.
Right.
So you kind of have that going on and you're not always aware of it. And as a client, I would say this, that if you do a service and, it was a pleasant experience and everything was good, but 2, 3 times I get home and I can't figure out what to do with it. I just can't even get it close to what you've done. Um, Especially if my hair is complicated, hair color and, styling options and all that sort of stuff. At a certain point, I'm going to assume you couldn't do what you needed to do because I can't make it look the way it's supposed to look. Like, I'm going to blame you. Who
Yeah.
else am I going to blame? So I'm
Right.
going to find somebody who is going to give me something I can replicate. And whether that's a different style, perhaps, because they don't want to tell me anything either, make it simpler, or they're going to share with me how to take care of myself. I think we lose a lot of business when we think big picture that people aren't selling or talking about retail. And we know that factually. It's got to be bad for business.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's one thing that I'm grateful for is having the years of experience that I do have with, clients not coming back, with clients coming back, and why, and changing what we're doing behind the chair affects that, like you said. It's just, it's kind of crazy, So tying it back into our mentorship conversation is, you know, those are things you learn by watching, right? And by being around someone and learning from someone else who's having those conversations,
Yep.
who's recommending products, and if we don't have any of those role models, it's really hard, right?
We have to reinvent, I think, mentorship as we know it,
Yeah.
because the platform that it was on forever, it's kind of fractured now.
Yeah.
So we don't have as many commission salons, traditional salons where mentorship was taking place. And as I mentioned, a lot have gone hybrid. That kind of takes some of it away. Many people. Well, here's an interesting stat. Salon owners commission and rental salons, full salons, plus all the people who are independent. Those are both people who own their own businesses or are self-employed. As a salon of one, being a suite or as a chair, versus those who again who own salons. We're at over 70% of the industry is self-employed. I
Oh,
can't find another industry that's 70% self-employed except maybe for realtors. And so that doesn't feel right to me. There's great value in working with teams, and there's great value in having mentors and having bosses, not bad bosses. And I think also we've had a habit of like sitting in our. My father would always say, "You're sitting in your own shit." And I think as an industry, sometimes that happens to
yeah,
us. You hear
yeah,
stories about people who are just miserable, but they're kind of paralyzed in their misery.
yeah,
And I think we have to help people get past that too, because I think we're losing more people than we've ever lost. Because what we're hearing is that suites have about 40% annual turnover right now. So people are going in and quickly realizing they just can't afford it. They
yeah,
don't have the service dollars. That's a problem. We have had a lot of people move to more rental in salons. They're lonely even in salons with people around them because they're not really part of a team. So we're losing people there as well. And then all those things taken together have led the old school, I don't know if that's the right word, but the traditional salon, um, to be more fractured at greater risk. And that creates its own kind of problems because when a business struggles, sometimes a lot of the good stuff they do kind of just falls apart unknowingly. So we're in a very messy time. And
yes,
I take it all back to this shift towards independent, that when I look at the larger world, I'm looking for role models. Like, who do we need to be like? And I can't find it.
yeah. Well, I get it, and I feel like, I spend a lot of time in schools, teaching at schools, and one of the thing the students always ask is, how do I find a mentor? How do I, and they reach out to me and ask me, will you be my mentor? And it's like, I don't even know if they know what that means. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Most
And
can.
it breaks my heart that they don't know who the mentors are,
Yeah.
because I think because a lot of the generation that's in school right now, and I'm generalizing,
Mhm.
they know who hairdressers are by social media. So if you don't have a social media presence
Yeah.
and you're not talking about these things, even as a salon owner, you
Yeah.
know, are you talking about these things? Because that's what people are saying they want now, And if people don't know that you could be their mentor, you could be a mentoring salon, you know, um, you got to set it up to grow your people into your culture, into a culture they want to be a part of, And it's hard because I know a lot of salon owners who aren't able to do the apprenticeship programs financially that they used to do, or they've
Yeah.
shortened them,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. And, it's expensive. It's just,
Yeah.
it's going by
Come
the
by.
wayside, unfortunately. And so through the digital world, we can help with that. I'm actually doing something with a mentorship program, and it's just, but you can only touch so many people at a time, you
Yeah.
know, and it's
That's
that
why I think
one-on-one.
that's why I think we have a shortage. I mean, I just do the math. I think old school people, a lot more people had mentors. It was a normal conversation. You just heard it all the time.
Yeah.
Now, I think there is a lot of confusion, first amongst kind of general population of hairdressers, younger hairdressers, between role models and mentors.
Yeah.
All the time. No, Oprah's not your mentor. I'm sorry.
She's mine. We just had coffee. Yeah.
Of course you did. I love that.
Yeah.
No, but you know what I mean. I think again, mentorship kind of has to be reinvented, and I think part of that reinvention um, aligns with something that we're seeing feels big. It's not as big as as I think people feel it is, and that's the coaching space and mentorships and
Yeah.
coaching. There's some similarities, not always exactly the same. But I believe that if people choose to go to independence, and if you recognize that mentorship is a key driver of success and has been doing it for decades, and there's a lot of proof points around it, whether you're independent or in a traditional salon. If you choose to go independent, you need to put aside a budget for a mentor.
I
You
was
have to
just
invest in
thinking,
yourself
yeah,
because that was part of the value that the salon gave you for being an employee.
yeah,
It's like in, more traditional companies, because, oh, you get a 401k and the HR department gives you counseling and, all these things that most salons don't have. And well, I think if the traditional salon had a mentorship and you decide you don't want to work in that environment anymore, you want to go independent, you're going to go in a suite, one of the best things you can do is to shore up your chances of succeeding is to, I'll say, acquire a mentor.
yeah, yeah,
And it means investing, it means paying because why most people aren't willing. Mentorship is a two-way street.
yeah, it is.
And in the salon, in the old, again, the traditional model, it was a two-way street. That person maybe was the creative director in the salon, the education director, the owner, a partner, whatever, or more experienced stylist. But it was a two-way street. It was, you were in proximity. So some of the two-way street just might have been like, you're making that person feel special. It's like
Yeah,
you've elevated them in their own mind and they have something to give to you. So that, there's that. But the other parts are, yeah, part of my job as an owner is to mentor you. We both win. You become a more valued and productive employee. Your earnings go up over time. Your security goes up. So there's a reason to mentor. I think with independence, that reason is going away and being replaced by professional mentors. And that's not a bad thing.
yeah. And I think there's, like you said, there's a difference between a mentor and a role model, and that
Oh,
there's a difference between a mentor and a coach too,
yes,
right?
absolutely.
And I see a lot of people offering coaching services that maybe are pretty brand new,
Yes,
or they're
yes.
coaching people how to build their social media, and I think that's a cool thing to have a coach for. I have two coaches, that I invest in my development as a professional, as you know, staying current and relevant with what's going on in the world of our
Yep.
industry and being able to offer those things. But, it's not free. And I um, invest in it. And like you said, you have to look at it as like an investment in
Hmm.
yourself, in your
Yep.
business, in, growing that foundation, whatever it may be.
We do it for balayage.
Yeah.
We do it for balayage. We do it for elevating our haircutting skills, right?
Yeah.
We don't think of that as being in the same lane, but I do.
Yeah.
It's really expanding your mind, expanding your knowledge, expanding your skills. And again, from the technical side, I think we've always understood that we probably are going to have to make an investment minimum of time if the
Yeah.
salon's paying to bring in people. I mean, we may have to spend some money. And I think even in the shift to independence, we saw an understanding that, yeah, I'm independent. I'm going to go to those workshops.
Yes.
And a lot of folks do, but no one's thinking about, but what about the mentor, the career mentor, the business mentor,
Yeah.
and the technical mentor? Because that one class hopefully inspired you. Hopefully it gave you a little bit of something more than what you already had. But like you said, I mean, practice and having people check your work. I mean, there's
Yeah.
so much more to it.
Yeah. And I think about my own, when I had a salon and I trained people, I trained people out of school because I wanted to build people
Mhm.
in the culture
Yep.
that I envisioned.
Yep.
And it was kind of like a teaching hospital, so I'd have the apprentices would be watching and listening and taking notes on what we were doing. And I wanted my clients to be comfortable if there ever any was a reason, because I had an agent and I was out of the salon a lot and my schedule was very unpredictable. And my clients would be comfortable going to those apprentices when they got on the floor because I showed my clients that they were learning. They learned, so they built the confidence and they built the relationship with
Yep.
that client. And I think
Yeah.
back, like I talk to them now, and and I had a salon for 8 years, and I I have a, like maybe 10 stylists that I really, really helped grow from school and stuck around and really did it. But it wasn't easy. My mentors were not easy on me.
Yep.
And I find I don't know if people can take it that way anymore. Because I have a salon owner friend who had told me that she was like really firm with somebody one day and said, you got to build your confidence, and this is how you're going to do it. Da, da, da. And they needed to go home because they were emotionally disturbed by that.
Mm.
Like they got their feelings hurt. And
Yeah.
it's like, how do you find a balance between making someone, proud of what they do by really pushing them to be their
Yep.
absolute best, and not sugarcoating it, not um babying somebody and saying, "Oh, that looks really good," when it doesn't. Like, here's what it needs, here's what we do. And
Yep.
I think people want to hear the good things, but they don't want to hear the things they need to work on in
Yeah.
general.
Yeah, and we hear that. I mean, there's a lot of. I love Gary Vaynerchuk. He's always like he's a thought leader in digital, and he's been talking a lot about the challenge of I think kind of a multi-generational situation where, from a parenting perspective, we kind of got into this everybody gets a trophy time,
Yes. Yep.
which some people argue is kind of the foundation to young adults maybe not dealing with certain types of criticism as they're growing up. So it doesn't feel normal. Like
Yeah.
someone's telling them that something's not right, and you don't have that context. My generation, the grandparents and the parents were brutal. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but
Right.
well, that's of the job. Being criticized was not that big a deal.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Yep.
so it was just part of life, and it evolved mostly, I would say, in good ways. Respecting people's boundaries at a certain level. Respecting people's rights as human beings. Respecting our time. I mean, I think all that's important. Um,
Absolutely.
having said all that, I want to back into something you mentioned, owning a salon. I think one of the most detrimental conversations in the industry today that some coaches have taken viral is that traditional salons are toxic. I hate black
Yes.
and white statements. Like,
Yeah.
am I know some of the most of the happiest hairdressers I know are people who work inside of team businesses, traditional
Yes.
salons, commissioned employees, making great livings, doing it for decades, having benefits, having boundaries respected, having themselves respected as artists, as people who provide services, all that stuff. And so this idea that, oh, so traditional salons are toxic, I just want to say, stop,
Yeah.
give us context. Some are,
Yeah. Some
some are.
aren't. Just like some people are toxic, some aren't.
Right. And that goes to the independent side. So
Yeah.
you've got yeah, I'm hoping for a return to a model that has been proven works, and that is the traditional salon with some, adjustments, for time that's, happened, over decades that we hope we all just get better with time, right? And I would hope that the traditional salon, that the industry begins a new conversation like, how do we plant more seeds to bring that back? Because as someone who studies the industry, I can say with great confidence that independence is not the best path for success for most people. It
Yeah.
just hasn't been forever. We've had it for over 100 years. We've never shined a very big light on it, mostly because the success stories haven't been there. And I've been self-employed. It's hard. You have got you understand. You
Yes.
you have to double down, in your gut
Yeah.
to get through everything that has to be done. It's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah. It's not. And I was at a school last week, and what someone who had just started school, who they dropped out of school they were going to be an engineer, and they dropped out to become a hairstylist. And that's what I did too.
Interesting. Really?
Yeah. I was going to be a mechanical engineer and just
Oh,
wanted to do hair so bad. So
I
anyway,
didn't
he
know
was
this.
telling me his thing is, h- how do you um how do you grow and build your confidence? He said, because, like it's that, and he said, personal grounding to where I value myself. It's
Mhm.
hard for me to value myself. And I was like, again, I was a little bit heartbroken, like, you know, but it's true. Even I go through that, to where it's like,
Totally.
you know, the longer you're around, it's like the longer you're around and you're still
Yep,
it's just hard to sometimes believe in yourself, and you need someone else to kind of pick you up and say, "No, you got this," you know?
yep,
So,
yep. Because over time, careers in life happens, shit happens, things
yeah,
go wrong,
yeah,
Um, the average American's on a job for 5 years. I've been doing this for 45 years. I've had 8 jobs,
yeah,
and um, and I've only applied for one, which was the first one, which that's one of the things that gives me confidence about myself and my work. I'm like, well, people keep asking me to do something, so I guess I'm doing something right. Um, and talking again about younger people and their search for confidence, again, I believe that the cultures of salons and then independence again has made that harder too. It just has.
yeah, yeah. And I think, the people that are searching, that are looking for a mentor, what would you say to them? Like, how would you recommend they go about finding someone?
I think so much of getting ahead in life starts with really focusing on self-awareness. You really have to find a way, and sometimes it's hard without a mentor, but if I was, again, advising someone in search of, I'd say, try to figure out where you are. Try to figure out what you need. Try to figure out, where do you feel good about yourself, as a person, as a professional, where are you with your skills and your knowledge? Your self-assessment may not be spot on. You may find a mentor who may give you some insights that take you a little bit different direction. But I think we have to align ourselves ideally with someone who can bring us what we need. And if we don't start with what we need, that could bring its own problems. And then secondly, you have to have a personality style fit. You just really do. And mentors
Absolutely.
you're supposed to talk to. Like, let's be clear about that, right? To anybody that's confused about what mentors are. Role models, you don't have to talk to them. I mean, you
Yeah,
look at them from afar. You're like, oh, wow, I love that. Every time there's a show, I want to go see Ruth on stage because she's one of my role models. Because, oh my God, look at all the things she's done. Versus, that person. And sometimes, look, I've known people brave enough, to walk up to people like you and say, will you be my mentor? And if timing was right, sometimes the answer is yes. It might be
yeah,
temporarily, but sometimes it happens. And the only way it really becomes mentorship is if there's some conversations between the two of you where that person can give you feedback that you have an opportunity to do something with, and hopefully, it takes you to a better place, and then from there see what happens. And I also think, talking about mentors, most people have many over time.
yes,
I've had many,
me too.
and I think that's been so critical to my career because we grow. We can outgrow our mentors.
Yeah,
They can outgrow us.
yeah.
So,
I remember Trevor Sorby, who was one of my first mentors. I remember him saying, "You're going to grow to a place where you're going to have to cut the strings and fly, fly, fly." And I was like, "No, I don't want to, no." And then it did happen one day,
mhm,
and I had an opportunity to do something new and different, and, work with a new brand. And he said to me, "You got to do it. You have to do
yep,
it." As much as he wanted me to stay, he wanted me to grow. And I think that's what a true mentor does, is help
yes,
people become better and better and
absolutely.
better and better. And then, yeah, then they need something else from someone else.
And they recognize and acknowledge the relationship because mentorship's not one way. If you think you have a mentor and they don't realize that they're your mentor, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
So, but I've met many people who, when they talk about their mentors, it's clear that that person doesn't realize. So I think, again, it's that two-way thing. And how powerful to have a mentor who tells you, fly, little bird.
Yeah.
They've realized that you're ready for whatever's next, and
Yeah.
they've given you all that they can give you. And I think that really is powerful. You don't want to be the little bird that's become big and is sitting in mom's crowded nest.
Yeah.
It's like, fly, little bird,
Get
fly.
out. We need the space.
But even in a salon or a professional relationship, it's I think it is important to kind of know when it's time to move on in a very good way, and
Yeah.
maybe the next mentor.
Yeah, for sure. And don't burn any bridges, like,
Never,
yeah, keep
never. It's a small industry.
it is. It
And if
sure
you want to
is.
burn it, just go find some quiet space, kick something, do what you got to do. I highly recommend do anything but burn it.
Yeah.
Just move on, leave it alone,
Yeah.
because you just never know.
You never know. All right. Well, God, you have so much wisdom and we could talk forever.
We could. Love
Which
it,
I
always.
love talking to you. It's always like enlightening and inspiring and it makes me think, you know? So
Thank
we'll
you.
have to do this again.
We will have to do it again.
Yeah.
I'm excited for everything you're doing, including painting. Last time we talked, you told me you're doing some painting. And
Yes, I
man,
actually I sold 2 of my paintings.
and I
What?
just, it's so exciting. I mean, so exciting. And tying back to what we were talking about, I think that the creative outlets, there's so
Yes.
many people in the industry who talk about artistry. And, being around for a long time, I know that for many, being behind the chair, there's a lot of challenges to that, and because you don't always have the ability to do art, so you do Naha, you do all kinds of things, but I think, again, the most successful people I know have their own creative outlets. A lot of times it's in here, sometimes it's adjacent, like painting or different forms of art. So I think that would be one other thing I would just add to all this, as maybe we wrap up. Find
Yeah.
outlets, that help reinforce what you want to achieve.
Yeah. You know, I'll just talk about myself for a minute because this is
I love it. It's
this
your
is what
podcast.
what you just brought up is I paint, but I also work with hair as art. And
Mm,
I'm not talking about the hair we do behind the chair or the hair that people walk down the street wearing. It's the art. It's, the stuff I do for award
yep,
competitions,
yep,
and I do it for myself. I do it for myself to say,
yep.
I want to make these things, but I wouldn't be able to do it if I hadn't had the mentors that taught me all the bits and pieces.
Yes.
And that's why I've started a mentorship program for those skills and for those things that are being lost. The people that know them are retiring or haven't shared it, with more than a few
Yes.
people. And I want to help people who want to do weirdo stuff and want to do the art stuff, have the pieces they need to be able to put it all together for themselves, for their own ideas.
And people who plug into talented folks like yourself you've got so much context and so much experience in it, and really understand, all the fundamentals. I think one of the things that's been lost on people, and for all the wrong reasons, is that the foundations of great hairdressing, which were created a long time ago,
Yes.
they haven't changed very much. And people, I remember years ago when I worked for Pivot Point, and Pivot Point was kind of very much steeped in the old school design principles and roller sets and all those kind of things. And
Yeah.
I remember one day, as not a hairdresser, saying to Leo Passage, the founder, like, "Can we just get rid of the roller sets now, please?"
Yeah. Yep.
And he was like, "Gordon," he's like, it's foundational to everything. He says, if I can get a student to understand how to do this and get them to practice, they may never ever do it.
Right.
Now, when they work with an iron of any kind, when they work with a blow dryer, it's transformational in what they're able to do, because in that roller work, they've become to understand design principles and understand how hair moves and understand things they would not otherwise understand.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
witnessed it and I was like, damn, he's right again.
I know. I told the people in school last week, I said, if you have to learn finger waves, and everybody went, and I said, I learned finger waves. I didn't want to learn them. Trevor Sorby made me know them because
Yep.
we would use them. And I showed them my current Naha collection that I'm a finalist for. And I said, what's that in that picture? A finger wave. I'm like, exactly. And if I didn't know how to do it, and it wasn't a finger wave, in a regular hairstyle, it was used in an avant-garde way. But
Yep.
if I hadn't known how to do a finger wave, I wouldn't have been able to think of, let me put that in this situation.
And it's such a good example because, as not a hairdresser, and I just think about hair fashion and fashion over time, over the course of my life, finger waves have come back more than a few times. And
Yeah.
especially now that we're dealing with textured hair, I think, there's a lot more of it.
Yeah.
But, Halle Berry, I mean, she's
Yes.
come around a few times with them. And so it isn't even, so A, yes, knowing how to do them, and translating it into fashion as it changes over time and everything that we do. But a lot of that stuff comes back,
Yeah, it does.
you
And you
know?
could you could be the one that creates a trend by doing something that has been
Yes,
around in a new way.
absolutely. You're
And that's
so
what
right about
happens,
that.
right?
Exactly what happens. It's
Yeah.
exactly what happens. So I love it. Such good stuff. I love talking with you.
I know, like, I totally do. So we'll have to have part 2, part 3,
But anytime, Ruth,
3rd,
anytime.
4th edition, but
People will
thank
tire of
you.
me, so
No, thank you so much for being on the Golden Goat.
I still love it. You are such a goat.
And, yeah, we'll do this again. And thank you for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge and your ideas with the listeners.
Thank you, Ruth. Always. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye, folks.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Ruth Roach, and I just want to say if you have any questions at all about anything, or there's more stuff you want to hear about, please DM me on my Instagram. You can also find out more there about my mentorship program. And until next time, this is what I have to say. Bye. Get it? The goat? Just kidding.